So one of the other reasons I would encourage someone at university to opt for this career or this subject is because it's actually very, very fulfilling, especially if you love words. Like I said, it's, oh my gosh, it's so fulfilling in ways that I maybe cannot even describe in this video. But long story short, before you opt or you, because, okay, let's actually be serious. Some people don't get accepted into the courses that they wanted and they end up bencamela or taking teaching as a last option. So my encouragement or my message to you today is, before you ncamela or you opt for teaching as a last option, try languages. Just check it out. Check out the brochure from the Department of Languages at whatever college or university you're applying at. Just check it out. Try it out. Go to their orientation classes, their first, one of those classes that are like free or trial classes. Check them out and see. You might actually like them. Otherwise, I hope there's someone out there who actually applied for languages as a first option. It's actually not a bad first option. I love it. I have no regrets. I'm so glad I chose to study languages. And I also wanted to add, we don't only do translation, but obviously in this video I'm simplifying it as much as possible. Actually, let me list some of the jobs that you can get if you study languages. You can become a project manager, you can become a freelance translator, you can become an in-house translator, you can become a localization manager, you can become a CEO of a big translation agency, you can become there's so many things that I'm thinking of, but I'm just trying to, like, so many roles within the company I work for example, but I'm trying to think whether having languages as a qualification is compulsory for those roles. But I do want to say that if you study languages, it doesn't mean you have to sit and translate. That is not the only thing you can do. You can do so many sophisticated things with language. Or you can work in parliament. You can be one of the people that develop terminology for your target language. You can be an interpreter. I almost forgot. You can be an interpreter. You can interpret at hospitals. Let's say maybe there's a patient from KZN that is at a hospital where people cannot speak Zulu. Actually, that's a bad example. A lot of people know Zulu at this point. But okay, let's just use that as an example. The doctor speaks English. The patient only speaks Zulu and doesn't understand English. You can come in there as a Zulu person with a qualification, with an interpreting qualification. And you can, when the patient speaks in Zulu, you say the same thing that patient said into English to the doctor and vice versa. That's an interpreter. Sometimes people interpret at big conferences. For example, those UN meetings, there's usually an interpreter there. Oh my gosh, there's so many things you can do if you study languages. So many things. What else? There's interpreters at court during hearings. It's so cool, guys. It's so cool having a language qualification. So try it out, check it out, do more research. Ask me in the comment section. Ask me what else you can do besides the things that I've listed here. Ask if there's maybe a specific interest that you have in addition to your love for languages, so I can maybe direct you to say, okay, if you love languages and journalism, you can become a news anchor. You see, the ideas are starting to flow. You see, you can be the next Nokolo Grootboom because you studied languages and journalism. As an example, you can become a writer for, I almost said for a newspaper, but I'm thinking now newspapers are dying out. But that's one of the options I had studying my career. I used to write for Crocodile Mail in Grahamstown. I've written some articles for Isolezo Lesxhosa because I studied language and I also studied journalism at the same time. Again, I want to encourage you that just because you studied languages doesn't mean that'll be your only career option going forward. For example, me, I studied languages and journalism, so I could have been a journalist had I chose to, or had I had more opportunities on the journalism side of things. So it's usually mixed language with another elective or another subject, right? Whatever. Some people take journalism and history, journalism and languages and politics, languages and history, languages and whatever else. So don't think that, okay, if if I study languages and I don't end up wanting to be in, or I don't end up getting a job in translation, then what? You can always have the other subject as a second option. What else can you do if you study language? You can become a lecturer or a teacher. Go back to high school, teach some high school kids, teach them isiXhosa, teach them grammar, teach whatever people teach out there. Or you can become a lecturer. You can also become a oh my gosh, there's so many things you can become if you study languages. Try it out, guys. And I used to think when I first got to university in 2013, okay, story time, I didn't know that there was such thing as studying isiXhosa at university, because according to my understanding, Xhosa or your mother tongue is something that you study only from primary up to high school level. And I thought, why would anyone study isiXhosa at university? And I went to Rhodes University, and once when someone told me there's a course that I could take, I thought, why would such a prestigious university have isiXhosa as a subject? Again, that's me now looking down at my own language, but that is a story for another day. But universities do have languages as one of the electives. In case you didn't know, like me, now you know. And you don't just study the language like you used to study it at high school, whereby you study grammar, literature, and whatnot. You study it. You go deeper into the language, right? And then some of the topics that I'm thinking of right now from the top of my head that I studied at university, we studied language and how it interacts with politics and the world at large, which is something that you don't normally do at high school. Language and politics. We studied translation. Again, translation doesn't get covered at high school. At high school, you normally just study the language in its purest form, how to write, how to use grammar and whatnot. But then at university now, that's when you get introduced into translation. What is translation? How to translate, the rules of theories of translation, and then you do translation practicals. So again, when I say study languages at university, don't expect to just study the same thing that you did in high school. There's so much more. There is so much more to languages, guys, that I think a lot of people don't even know about. There's lexicography as well that you can study, which is basically the creation, how dictionaries get created. Dictionaries. They'll also teach you about who's making decisions. How come your... Oh my gosh, there's so much that I want to get into, but maybe I don't want to make this video so long. But you start to see and realize a lot of things. Have a lot of things answered, a lot of questions that you had answered about how languages interact with one another. It's like this. My head is spinning now. There's so many things I want to talk about with regards to what I learned at university with regards to languages and culture and all that kind of stuff, and history. Yeah. Anyways, consider applying for a languages course. Hopefully you applied for a language course at university as a first option, but if you didn't and you happen to get rejected for a first option, don't lose hope. Try and go and try and see if the language department at whatever institution you had applied at, try and see if there's still a space. You might end up liking it like I did. Because when I went to university, I had gone there to apply for... My dream was like, I want to be a journalist. I didn't know languages translation existed. But now, looking back, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love where I am. Does it pay well? Yes, it does. But it's not the highest paying industry, but it does pay well. And obviously, it will depend what company you're working for, wara. But in general, it does pay well. And then if you don't get a full-time job that's another advantage of studying translation. If you do not get a full-time job working for a company, you can create your own jobs easily by becoming a freelancer. For example, as a doctor, if you can't find a job as a doctor, you can just say, okay, I'll just open my own practice and start practicing as a doctor. I'm sure there's a lot of money and a lot of regulations that can lead up to that process. But with freelancing in the translation industry, You do not need much to start as a freelancer. All you need is your degree. And sometimes, to be honest, there's some people who do freelance translation without even having degrees. But anyways, I'm not here to encourage that. It actually becomes a bit harder if you don't even have a qualification. Long story. But I want to say, looking at the job industry in South Africa especially, we know that e-job, the job sector, it's hard for people to find jobs. But with translation, I can promise you that you will be able, with the right direction, with the right guidance, and being connected to the right people. And by connected, I don't mean corruption, government officials, not just knowing people like myself who can advise you in terms of how to do to start your freelancing career. I'm just saying here there's hope. Even if you don't get a full-time job right immediately after university, you can still make money. I'm gonna close this video, but I made in 2016, I was doing honors. The biggest amount of money I've ever had, I think it was 20 something thousand for a project that I was doing, translating a research project for some PhD students that had hired me to do that. So first they paid me 20 something thousand. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me not get into it. Oh, I actually took 20,000. That 20,000, I took some of it and built a flat at home, extended the flat at home back home. And then they paid me the second time around. I think the second time around they paid me another 20 something. So I think the project overall, the total amount I got from that project, it was close to 50,000. I just can't remember now, but I remember 220Ks coming to me. And the second time around, I gave my mom 15K. It was probably the first time my mom had 15K at once in her account. So I basically changed her life without even having a full-time job, because at that time I wasn't working. I was still a student, but I had these big amounts of money that I could send home. Where am I going with this? I'm trying to encourage you to say that there's money to be made with languages. So consider taking a course in language studies. Okay, thanks. Bye.